Hello, everyone. You're listening to Alternative Revelations with Linda Emanuel. And this is podcast number 126. And the following, if it resonates with you, so be it. If not, just disregard it. And before I get started, I just want to mention a couple things that in November, January, Scorpio was in line with Mars. And it hasn't happened since November of 1925. And the secret societies and the Jesuits plan everything around astrology. So this is when the Jesuits started their plan for revenge against America. They've been plotting this for over about 250 years. And now they're making their move. And if they can destroy America, the rest of the world will follow. And the Roman Empire never ceased to exist. And the god of revenge of the Romans is Mars. That is why Mars alignment with Scorpio is so deadly. It's all about revenge. Today, this podcast is going. Two of the cities are about revenge. This is all about Grand Rapids and Lansing, Michigan. And what really threw me was, I always start off with boundaries. And I always start, maybe, let's say on the east. Well, the east was like this Highway 23 right a little bit west of Detroit. But all the cities along Highway 23, even Ann Arbor, were safe. And the only town that was hot was this little town 12 miles north of Ann Arbor called Whitmore Lake. Now, what in the heck is this thing standing all alone? Detroit is safe, Ann Arbor is safe, all these towns around it are safe, but yet Whitmore Lake, which is on Highway 23, 12 miles above Ann Arbor, is hot. So I asked Creator, what's going on? And Creator said, this is not a Jesuit revenge. This is a club member revenge. Somebody living in the town of Whitmore Lake is being targeted. Yes, they are going to wipe out a whole town just because of one or couple people. I don't know who they are. So that town is standing all alone by Detroit. Detroit is safe. Ann Arbor is safe. That whole area, except for Whitmore Lake, is safe. So now I'm going to move west to Lansing, Michigan, which is halfway between Grand Rapids and Detroit. And Lansing's pretty straightforward. Lansing is bounded by a highway on the north called 69, and that's a boundary. Anything north of 69 above Lansing is safe. And then to the west is a highway, a small highway called 100, and that's the western boundary. And the eastern boundary of Lansing is a little road called Okemos. I think it's Okemos or AS Road. And that takes you down all the way from around 69 straight down to Mason, which is in the southeast corner. And Mason is hot. So there's really no highway on the southern boundary. So you take, I'm going to leave the map of Lansing, the link. So just draw a straight line across all the way to 100. But right to the northwest of Mason is a town called Delhi Center Township. And that's hot. But then to the west of Delhi is a town called Windsor Charter Township, and that's safe. And to the west of that is Potterville, and that's safe. And Creator's telling me club members live in those two towns. So then you'd go over to 100 and go straight up all the way to 69 Grand Ledge. Grand Ledge is hot. Above 69, Watertown is safe. Bath Township is hot. DeWitt is safe. And the whole area of Lansing and East Lansing and Meridian Charter Township are hot. All that area. The only two safe towns that are really close to Lansing are just Potterville and Windsor Charter Township. There's some people that live in this town that are very important. I don't know who they are. But Highway 100 to the west is the boundary. 69 to the north. Okemos Road to the east, which ends up in when it's running south, it runs into Mason. That's a corner. That's the southeast corner of the grid. And the northeast corner is Bath Township. All that area, that grid in there, is all hot except for those two towns called Potterville and Windsor Charter Township. So that finishes Lansing. And by the way, Lansing, there's no revenge for Lansing. It's just about depopulation. And now I'm going to move on to Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is about a Jesuit revenge. And the next story after Grand Rapids, I've said the safe and hot zones. I'm going to tell you why Grand Rapids is being targeted by the Jesuits. It's a great story, not great, it's a story behind it. So looking at Grand Rapids, I'm going to have the map. If you pull up the map, it's going to be at the very top of the map. It's going to be a town called Sparta, and that's the northernmost town that's going to be under the 5G attack. And it's actually a standalone town. It's just going to be attacking the town itself. And the next town over from Sparta to the east is a town called Rockford. And Rockford is hot, but between Sparta and Rockford, it's safe. They're not, the 5G between these two towns isn't turned on. It's just turned on in Rockford itself. So moving on down clockwise to a town called Cannonburg. And Cannonburg is hot. So it's just hot by itself. Nothing, not connected. In fact, there's a river called the Grand River running through. Anything toward the side of Cannonburg to the east of the Grand River, it's all safe. Especially even if you move up to Rockford, it's all safe in there between Rockford and the river. The Rockford's just hot, and Cannonburg is hot all by themselves. There's a town called Alton, and Alton is safe. It's pretty far east. And then when you get down to the river, you're going to see a town that's across the river. It's called Ada, and Ada is hot. And Forest Hills right below that is hot. And if you move east along the river, the Grand River, Lowell is safe, and Lowell Charter Township is safe. Moving on down, Alto is safe. And then there's a town on the east side of the river, Whitneyville, and that's safe. And then east of Alto, there's a town called Clarksville, that's safe. And below Alto and Clarksville, there's a town called Freeport, and that's hot. And then if you go further south, below Caledonia, and Caledonia is hot. Now Middleville is your southernmost, and that's hot. And then moving to the west is Wayland, and that's safe. Now the town called Dorr, that's hot. Burnups, that's hot. And then there's your corner, Burnups. And then when you're moving up the grid, you come to a town north of Burnups called Jamestown. And Jamestown is actually safe. But to the east of Jamestown is Byron Center, and that's hot. And all these towns inside this grid, like Wyoming, Kentwood, Cutterville, Grand Rapids, Walker, they're all hot. But right above Jamestown is another safe town called Hudsonville. And right above that is a town called Georgetown Township. And that's safe. And this is really interesting. There's a town called Granville. And Granville actually, let's see here, I gotta get it, zoom in here. There's a Highway 11 right to the north of Granville, that's border. That whole area of Granville from 11 south, going below it south, all the way down a road called Ivan Rest, all the way down to 44th Street, and bounded by the highway, what is this highway? 196, that's all safe in there. That whole area, Granville, is safe to highway or to 44th Street Southwest. That whole area in there. If you're living in Grand Rapids, you probably know what I'm talking about. And then I'd just like to point out that the river's right there, the Grand River, it really twists around there. And all to the north of the Grand River, to the north and northwest, that's all safe in there. That's all safe. These parks, lot of safe area in there. And actually, Jamestown and those were the boundaries, but those were safe cities, and they're pretty close to Grand Rapids. It was really surprising that these towns were safe. And Spirit's telling me that that people that are important that live in these towns of Granville, Georgetown Township, Hudsonville, and Jamestown, those are all safe. And Zeeland Charter Township, that's safe, and Zeeland's safe out there, out to the west. So, but also Spirit's telling me to warn people that inside Grand Rapids, the town itself is underground fiber optics, but in the suburban and the urban areas, the underground fiber optics is not in the ground. So you just have to be concerned about it inside Grand Rapids. So that wraps it up, Grand Rapids. It's kind of went around clockwise all the way up to, oh, by the way, Mame is safe. That's up there in the north of it. And Comstock Park, that's hot. And Wright, let's see if Wright, what did I do about Wright? Wright is safe, and Mame is safe. And I'd also like to point out, it's really interesting when they're installing this 5G on these towers, they have to upgrade these control panels. And creators telling me that between these towns, if there's a lot of distance between them, the towns themselves are hot, but between the towns, they're regular towers. They haven't been able to upgrade these towers, so they will be working like with 4G or whatever. So between these towns, it's actually safe, and that also applies to Atlanta, and it also applies to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, when towns are shoulder to shoulder next to Dallas and Fort Worth or next to Atlanta, yes, they were probably, the 5G has saturated those cities. But in the case of Atlanta, there was like a couple hundred miles between the north and the south. Now, all these little towns that are scattered all over Georgia, the 5G is not going to be turned on between these towns. So if your town is under attack, you just have to leave the city, out of the city boundaries, a mile away, and you'll be safe. So I just want to point that out. Creators just bringing that up to me now. And this is a case of Grand Rapids, where these little towns, they're just hot by themselves. But in between the towns, if there's any towers, they haven't had time to upgrade the control panels to upgrade to 5G. So that takes care of Grand Rapids, and now I'm going to get into the story of why Grand Rapids is being targeted, especially by the Jesuits. So before I go into this story, I'm going to just remind you, once you understand how the Jesuits work, how the Roman Empire worked, even over 2,000 years ago, that they always had the last word or the last action. Nobody ever pulled anything over the Roman Empire. If they rebelled, they would go in and wipe out the whole community. That happened to the Jewish people in Judea in the 1st century. They were wiped out. And they did the same thing in Carthage. Hannibal, who was only 26 years old, invaded Italy and kicked their butt, and almost could have conquered Rome and wiped out the whole Roman headquarters, but he didn't do that. And then around when Hannibal was 69 years old, the Roman Empire came after him, but he committed suicide before they could get a hold of him. But about 60 years later, Rome went and destroyed Carthage, where Hannibal originated from. They destroyed the whole city down to the ground. They killed 500,000 people and took 50,000 slaves. Now, these people who they killed probably didn't even have an idea who Hannibal was or didn't know him, because this was a whole generation later. So that is the mindset of the Jesuits, revenge. And that is why the god of Mars was so prevalent this past November to January when Scorpio, which has a sting, aligned with Mars, who is the god of revenge for the Romans. So this story deals with Grand Rapids, and it's about a man who was really a humanitarian. He was born in Grand Rapids. His name was Martin Henry Carmody, Carmody, and I'll leave his link on Wikipedia. And he was the 7th Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. That is the international head of all the Knights of Columbus. And he was that Supreme Knight between 1927 and 1939. That's very important dates. Now he was also a papal chamberlain to Pope Pius XI, and that is really important to know. And this is what a papal chamberlain is. They were members of the papal court, and it was one of the highest honors that could be bestowed on a Catholic layman by the Pope. Known as Chamberlain of the Sword and Cape, when conferred upon laymen, it was mostly an honorary position, but a chamberlain generally served the Pope for at least 1 week per year during official or state ceremonies. So this man was very close to Pope Pius XI. Now, Pope Pius was made Pope in 1920, and he was a very good Pope. Most people have no use for popes. They think they're all bad. But this Pope Pius was really a good Pope. And I'm going to read you some excerpts from Wikipedia about Pius XI and his stand against communism, Nazism, and anti-Semitism. And I just want you to keep in mind that the Jesuits are the ones that created communism back in Paraguay around 1600, which was slave labor. And the Jesuits were behind all the wars. They believe in killing the heretics, Muslims, Protestants, Jews, everybody. They just believe in war and murder. And this Pius XI, listen to this. Pope Pius XI declared private property essential for the development and freedom of the individual. Those who deny private property also deny personal freedom and development. But private property has a social function as well. Private property loses its morality if it is not subordinated to the common good. And he also believed in the fair wages for the worker. He also believed that industrialization results in less freedom at the individual and communal level because numerous free social entities get absorbed by larger ones, meaning corporations. The society of individuals becomes the mass class society. So isn't that interesting? Everything he believed in is like the anti-Jesuits. So he goes on, when Mussolini and Hitler were persecuting the Jews, Pope Pius XI spoke out against this. He condemned this, even comparing Hitler to Judas. This guy was just so, he was just a good pope. So, Carmody was in his personal circle, and I have no idea what role Carmody played. But he was very close to Pius XI. And when Pope Pius died in 1939, they said he died of a heart attack. But Mussolini's mistress's brother was the doctor who took care of him. And Spirit is telling me that this doctor gave him an overdose of an opiate, and that's how he died. But the Jesuits had to get rid of him because he was everything that they weren't. He was the opposite of them. And the person who replaced him was a secret Jesuit called Pius XII. And oh my gosh, one of these days, I am going to do the history of the Jesuits. And when you understand their history of the Jesuits, you can make sense of everything up to now, what has been taking place in history. It'll become clear. It's been the Jesuits all along since they were created in 1541 to counter the Reformation that Martin Luther started, but they just got out of hand and out of control. There's a great history behind, I don't know if it's great, there's a history behind it that's just amazing. Everything, even, and when I get to St. Louis, there's a Jesuit revenge, and I'll tell you why, and it's really interesting. So I hope this podcast wasn't too long. They're targeting Carmody and Grant. That's why they're targeting Grand Rapids, just like Rome targeted Carthage because of Hannibal, what Hannibal did. Even though Carmody's long been dead since 1950, there is something that the Jesuits held against him, and I don't know what that is. So my next podcast is either going to be Bloomington, Indiana, which is another revenge, and then I might move across to Chicago area. That's a big area, and then down to St. Louis and down to Mississippi, South Haven. This has been a lot of work, but I guess it's worth it if it helps one person reach safety or know about sanctuary, what to do in October, because I've even got a plan what to do where I live in Afton, Missouri. That's going to be under attack. And I'm just 2 miles from the city of St. Louis, which is a Jesuit stronghold. And by the way, that's why St. Louis City is not going to be under attack. The Jesuits will be able to flock to the city of St. Louis for safety. And St. Louis U is a big stronghold of the Jesuits. So St. Louis is actually a pretty strong Catholic town, and the Jesuits have strong presence here. So until next time, good night and God bless.